Okay, perfect. Hello, everyone. I hope y'all are doing well as can be. 1 second, actually. Let me make sure. Perfect. We are back. So hello, everyone. Thank y'all for joining us for Black Feminist Writers in Palestine. I'm just so grateful for everyone to be here, even though under this difficult circumstances. My name is Jaimee Swift, and I am the founder and executive director of Black Women Radicals, which is a Black feminist advocacy organization dedicated to uplifting and centering Black feminist activism around the world. I am joined today by an esteemed panel of scholars, educators, activists, and organizers: Clarissa Brooks, Dr. Angela Davis, Breya Johnson, Dr. Briona Simone Jones, and Dr. Beverly Guy-Sheftall, who will discuss the importance of the Black feminist literary and political canon and mandate of Black feminist commitments and solidarity to a free Palestine. As students of Black feminist politics and movements, we know and understand that our liberation in the United States in the belly of the imperial beast is tethered to the liberation, freedom, and emancipation of all marginalized peoples around the world. We know that we come from a long, radical, and revolutionary tradition of Black women and gender-expansive organizers, educators, and activists who have and continue to be committed to the liberation struggles of oppressed and third world people. More specifically, and especially at this current juncture in Gaza and the West Bank, we know as Black feminists that our political commitments, mandates, and solidarity are bound up and intertwined with the liberation and self-determination of the Palestinian people. Throughout the years, Black women radicals such as Shirley Graham Du Bois, Angela Davis, Bell Hooks, Audre Lorde, June Jordan, Toni Morrison, Barbara Ransby, Margot Okazawa-Ray, Beverly Guy-Sheftall, and countless others have made it crystal clear about their solidarity and commitments to Palestine. Many of us cite their work, but what we have seen and observed presently by many who claim to have an abolitionist politic and praxis is silence. We cannot be silent, as what we are seeing and what has been going on for decades is the genocide, expulsion, surveillance, and collective punishment of Palestinian people. We will not be silent. We will not be complicit. Next, we will hear from Doctors Angela Davis and Beverly Guy-Sheftall, who will offer remarks on the radical Black feminist imperative that is solidarity with Palestine. After, we will hear from Clarissa Brooks, Breya Johnson, and Briona Simone Jones, who will offer remarks on historical and contemporary perspectives on Black feminist writers in Palestine. Dr. Davis and Dr. Sheftall, feel free to hop in about your perspectives on the long radical Black feminist tradition that is solidarity with Palestine.
I want to defer to Angela first. She knew that.
Hold on 1 second. I'm trying to start my video. Okay, sorry about the technical difficulties. Okay, I'll say a few words. Beverly, I was going to invite you to go first. But, first of all, let me say how honored I feel to be a part of this event this evening. We're at a new moment, a new historical moment, and the organizing in support of justice for Palestine that has unfolded over the last decade and a half or so is beginning to show its effects. And at the same time, there's this intensification of Zionism and assaults on people who are attempting to offer support and solidarity to the people of Palestine. I would just like to say that Beverly and I made a trip to Palestine in 2011, and perhaps you'll talk a little bit about that, Beverly, with a delegation of women of color and indigenous feminists. And when we came back from that visit, we were so moved and so disturbed that the situation was far worse than we imagined it to be. Even those who were seasoned participants in the campaign for justice for Palestine. And so let me say how heartened I am that radical Black feminists are taking up this challenge and are attempting to broaden and deepen this effort to develop an even deeper solidarity with the people of Palestine. I just want to say that I've been thinking a great deal this last period since the outbreak of violence in Gaza. I've been thinking a great deal about how much we need June Jordan's deep and incisive perspective on Palestine and the Middle East. And later on, I want to share, one of her pieces. She was the one who insisted that justice for Palestine was not just one of a whole number of causes which we might possibly choose. She argued that it was a moral litmus test for us all. If we're not prepared to think critically about what's happening in Gaza and the West Bank and East Jerusalem, if we simply imbibe the analysis that is coming forth from Israeli and US governmental military sources, we will not only be unprepared to understand and address the issues emanating from the current crisis, but we won't be able to understand the world around us, whether inside the US or in relation to the many struggles for justice and freedom all over the globe. And June was a friend of mine, and although I had been active in these solidarity campaigns over the years, it was as a result of my friendship with June that I became aware of how little I was doing at the time and how I needed to intensify my involvement. And I think she was absolutely right. Our relation to Palestine says a great deal about our capacity to respond to complex contemporary issues, whether we're talking about imperialism, settler colonialism, global racism, transphobia, homophobia, the climate, and all of the related questions. And I just want to repeat again what June said: Palestine is a litmus test, especially now. And so radical Black feminist approaches, and I feel so enlivened to be in the presence of people who identify as radical Black feminists. Hold on for a second. I think I'm having a problem with my image. Okay. So I was saying that radical Black feminist approaches demand a willingness to embrace complexity. We can walk and chew gum at the same time and do other things as well. So we embrace what often are represented as contradictions. We're aware of the danger of simplistic analyses and assumptions that there are always only two sides to choose from. And there's only one that can be chosen. And I just want to say that all the women are not white. and all the Black people are not men. And to criticize the Israeli government is not anti-Semitism. And also, it is possible to oppose the attacks by Hamas and say a resounding collective no to the massive Israeli military incursion that is now taking place in Gaza. You know, last night I participated in a program with the Oakland Symphony. I live in Oakland, and that's where I am now. So the Oakland Symphony did something that they call playlists, and they played music that I got to submit a long list of songs, and they played specific songs. It was supposed to be kind of the playlist of my life. And one of the things I offered was a union song, 2 union songs, Which Side Are You On? And Union Made. And I made it clear that I was so proud to be a union supporter, union member, and an honorary member of the International Longshore Workers Union. And especially because the ILWU had refused to unload ships from South Africa and kind of jump-started the anti-apartheid movement in the Bay Area. And they also had refused to unload ships from Israel. Now, that's all I said. I mean, I knew that people in the audience would get the connection between our, current situation and what I said. Now, after the intermission, I was going back on stage again. One of the musicians approached me to tell me that my comments about the ILWU not unloading Israeli ships were anti-Semitic. This is just before I was walking through the curtains to go back on stage. And I encountered these kinds of responses all the time, but I was still shocked. And so I simply responded to him that from the time I was very small, I've learned how to criticize the US government and governments all over the world. I've learned the difference between governments and people. And why is it that we're asked to believe that to criticize the Israeli state, the government of Israel, is equivalent to anti-Semitism? Anyway, why can we not see that to be in solidarity with those who suffer one of history's great tragedies is also to follow the leadership of those who have learned how not to replicate, even unintentionally, the violence of those who created that tragedy. Jewish Voice for Peace, If Not Now, and other progressive, radical Jewish organizations are now in the forefront of demands that the U.S., that the U.S. not continue to support the government of Israel and the IDF, as the IDF plans to enter Gaza with the intent of wiping out Hamas, regardless of how many civilians are killed. Let me ask you, is my image frozen? Oh,
yes,
sorry.
Dr. Davies, it is.
I think it may be.
Now you're back. Oh, we were back.
I think I have bad internet in my neighborhood. So I was talking about the fact that
I'm sorry, Dr. Davis. Wait, you're not on the screen anymore.
Okay.
There you are.
All right. And I was talking about the fact that Jewish organizations, prominent radical Jewish organizations such as Jewish Voice for Peace, and I work with Jewish Voice for Peace all the time, if not now, that they're in the forefront of demanding here in this country that the US not continue to support the government of Israel, even as the IDF plans to enter Gaza with the intent of wiping out Hamas, regardless of how many Palestinian civilians are killed. And we know that as of today, some 4,600 people have been killed in Gaza, and this includes more than 1,900 children. Now, radical Black feminist critical methodologies teach us to, and I'm borrowing this phrase from Mari Matsuda, to always ask the other question. Always ask the other question. And so she says, if the issue is about race, ask the question about gender. If it's about class, ask the question about sexuality, and so forth, so that we're always aware of the complexity of the entire situation. And so we should know that that we cannot choose one thing or another. I'm remembering that Audre Lorde told us that we had to learn how to live in harmony without contradictions. So even if we choose two things that appear to be in contradiction, we have to learn how to live with that and not move very quickly to remove one in favor of being able to retain the other. So we should know that if we choose to support Palestinian people, Palestinian men, women, trans people, gender nonconforming people, of course, half the population consists of children, we should know that we will probably be charged by some with anti-Semitism. But we have to be clear about the nature of anti-Semitism and its kinship with racism and xenophobia. We insist that we cannot embrace anti-racist and anti-xenophobic positions without also embracing struggles against anti-Semitism, and to be consistent in our opposition to anti-Semitism, we have to speak out against the dehumanizing characterizations of Palestinians by representatives of the IDF and the Israeli government. I think I may have already been speaking too long, but I want to thank you for this opportunity just to, present a few ideas, because I have been very, very upset these last weeks, and I can't stop thinking about what Palestinians who live in Gaza, but also now in the West Bank, are going through. And given the fact that Palestinians have always answered the call for solidarity with the Black Liberation Movement. And they answered the call for solidarity when I myself was in jail so many, many years ago. There's a very special place in my heart. And again, I want to thank you for giving us this opportunity to have this conversation. And I look forward to Beverly's remarks, and I look forward to the remarks of everyone else who's a part of the webinar.
Thank you so much, Dr. Davis. We appreciate you. Dr. Guy Sheftal, we would love to hear your remarks as well.
Okay, so first of all, I really want to thank the organization for inviting me. And I also want to thank you for the document that you all circulated, the title of which I'm going to forget right now. That is the most amazing thorough, cogent, moving, radical statement that I have seen, which captures the ways in which radical Black people in general, but particularly radical Black feminists, have been involved with Palestine. So that document is amazing. I shared it with Angela. I don't think she had seen it. I shared it with lots of other people. I want to follow Angela's suit and say something. She started with June Jordan as a friend. I want to say that my serious involvement with Palestine came as a result of my friendship with radical Black feminist historian Barbara Ransby. She was the one who initially got the 11 of us, Indigenous and women of color, to go to Palestine 11 years ago. We were at the National Women's Studies Association, and the idea came up. And by the way, NWSA is meeting again this weekend. So like June Jordan, Barbara Ransby had a lot to do with my deep commitment to Palestine. I would say that week that we were in Palestine in June was the most transformative week of my life. We were Palestinian, we were African American, we were South Asian, we were Indigenous. Some of us had grown up in South Africa. Some of us had grown up in Jim and Jane Crow South. One of us on an Indian reservation in Indigenous space. And so we were a diverse, committed group who spent a week together all over the place. I want to read just one little bit from the statement that Angela insisted that we start writing while we were actually riding around together in a bus, called A Call to Action from Indigenous and Women of Color Feminists. It's on your bibliography, of course. And I just want to read a little bit of it before I say a little bit more about Palestine. So this was the end of our statement. We reject the argument that to criticize the state of Israel is anti-Semitic. We stand with Palestinians, an increasing number of Jewish people, and other human rights activists all over the world in condemning the flagrant injustices of the Israeli occupation. We call upon all of our academic and activist colleagues in the US and elsewhere to join us by endorsing the BDS campaign and by working to end US financial support, then at $8.2 million daily, for the Israeli state and its occupation. We call upon all people of conscience to engage in serious dialogue about Palestine and to acknowledge connections between the Palestinians' cause and other struggles for justice. And then finally, remembering Martin Luther King Sr., injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. So that was the ending of the statement that we crafted while we were moving around in Palestine. Because some of my students are on this Zoom, I want to really share with everybody that Spelman College is the only historically Black college that has a chapter of Students for Justice in Palestine. It was organized initially by Bana Gadban, who was an undergraduate student from Syria. She organized the group when she was an undergraduate. And fortunately, we were able to hire her back as our first tenure track appointment, former student in comparative women's studies. And she has reimagined what Students for Justice in Palestine would look like. They have been meeting. They have been organizing protests around Atlanta. Morehouse students have joined us. And so the students at Spelman who are involved in Students for Justice in Palestine are on the case. And I just want to say how happy I am, Bana, Professor Bana, and students, that you have joined this cause. And it's one of the most significant aspects of the work that we are trying to do at Spelman. And we want other HBCUs to join in as well. I want to just mention a few other things in terms of the trip. I thought, having grown up in the Jim Crow South of Memphis, Tennessee, that I had seen, well, not everything, but I thought I really understood some of the worst aspects of oppression. And I'm just remembering, and Angela probably is too, and I have not been able to get this trip out of my mind. I can remember when we were on the buses, we were stopped. Israeli soldiers brought German Shepherd dogs up on the bus where we were, and it reminded me of protesting in the 60s in the Jim Crow South. Sometimes we had to show our passports, and I think in one case they were taken from us. We actually went into the home of a Palestinian family who had been expelled from their house and were in a legal situation and were able to be in the back of the house. And when we came to visit, the young Jewish kids who were in the front of the house actually shouted out obscenities to us. So I tried to imagine what it would have been like to live in Memphis, Tennessee, in the South, and have Southern white people come and ask Southern Black families to move out of their houses somewhere, and have white people to come in there and have to legally try to get your house back. I remember going through checkpoints. We remember going through checkpoints and weren't always treated with fairness and dignity. One of the things that I remember was meeting with Palestinian queers. You know, there's the assumption that queer people are just in the West or in the US. That was very moving. So I just want to underscore what Angela had said. I have been unable to get Palestine out of my head for the last month, not only because of the trip, but in many ways because of the trip and the bonds that we formed, 11 of us. And I was determined when I got back that I would teach about Palestinian feminisms in my courses and try very hard to get us at the Women's Center at Spelman to do something as it relates to student activism. And we have been committed to that. So I think I'll stop right there.
Wow, thank y'all both so much. And I'm just in awe and thankful because y'all are blueprints to us when we talk about not only solidarity with Palestine, but what is a radical Black feminist approach and tradition. So thank y'all both so much. But for the next part of this conversation, we're going to have Clarissa Brooks, Breya Johnson, and Briona Simone Jones offer remarks, right, on the historical and contemporary perspectives on Black feminist writers in Palestine.
Yeah, I can start us off. Hey, y'all, I'm Clarissa Brooks. I am a student, a former student of Beverly Guy Chef's Hall, and of course, in the lineage of Angela Davis. So I'm really lucky to be here. It's exciting to be on a call with your professor and friends, colleagues, and folks that I consider comrades. So super excited to be here. I think the important thing to name as to my point of being here as a journalist, as somebody who actively works in media and cares deeply about the role that media plays in building out this kind of consent that Americans have around Israel feels really important. I take very seriously building down the institution of objectivity because it was made to destroy marginalized people's voices. And yeah, that feels really critical to me. Today I'm going to read from Pat Parker's essay, Revolution, It's Not Neat or Pretty or Quick. It was written in August of 1980 during the BASTA conference in Oakland. And yeah, I was reading This Bridge Called My Back, and this essay just feels really poignant to read out. I'll just be reading a short section and then be passing it on to my other panelists. The second paragraph of this piece starts with, "We are in a critical time. Imperialist forces in the world are finding themselves backed against the wall. They are no longer able to control the world with the threat of force, and they are getting desperate, and they should be desperate. What we do this weekend and what we take from this conference can be the difference, the deciding factor as to whether a group of women will ever again be able to meet not only in this country, but the entire world. We are facing the most critical time in the history of the world. The superpowers cannot afford for us to join forces and work to rid this earth of them, and we cannot afford not to. The rest of the world is being exploited in order to maintain our standard of living. We, who are 5% of the world's population, use 40% of the world's oil. And then I'll take us to the last section that feels really important. To this, I must declare, I am not a good American. I do not wish to have the world colonized, bombarded, and plundered in order to eat steak. Thank you so much. And I will pass it to Briona.
Thank you, Clarissa. To begin, I'm both a student and a scholar of Black lesbian studies. The formation of my political identity can be traced back to or attributed to the Combahee River Collective, its 1977 Black feminist statement. It's in the statement that I became aware of the salience of what they coined and defined as an integrated analysis, and understanding that the major systems of oppression are interlocking. The Black lesbian feminist literary canon and their archive of activism clearly states that there are no hierarchies of oppression. For example, and this is sort of how I came into understanding and being in solidarity with Palestine and other folks through the publication of I Am Your Sister, edited by Dr. Beverly Gashepal, who's on the call, Rudolph Burr, and Dr. Cole, Dr. Janetta Cole. So Audre Lorde in 1989, in a commencement address to undergraduate students at Oberlin College, not only discusses the right for Palestinians to be free, but she offers an integrated analysis that connected the struggle for liberation across various bodies of people and locales. She writes, quote, "Our federal taxes contribute $3 million yearly in military and economic aid to Israel. Over 200 million of that money is spent fighting the uprising of Palestinian people who are trying to end the military occupation of their homeland. Israeli soldiers fired tear gas canisters made in America into Palestinian homes and hospitals, killing babies, the sick, and the elderly. Thousands of Palestinians, some as young as 12, are detained without trial in barbed wire detention camps, and even many Jews of conscience opposing these acts have also been arrested and detained. Encouraging your Congress people to press for a peaceful solution in the Middle East and for recognition of the rights of the Palestinian people is not altruism, it is survival." She goes on to say, "Apartheid is a disease spreading out from South Africa across the whole southern tip of Africa. This genocidal system in South Africa is kept propped into place by the military and economic support of the US, Israel, and Japan. In this country, children of all colors are dying of neglect. Since 1980, poverty has increased 30% among white children in America. 50% of African American children and 30% of Latino children grow up in poverty, and that percentage is even higher for the indigenous people of this land, American Indians," end quote. So for me, it's important to note that Lorde's integrated analysis, her political awareness partly emerged because of the dehumanization she experienced as a disabled Black lesbian. These experiences allowed her to see how every oppressed person and child were living under, as the police sound in the back, allowed her to see how every oppressed person and child were living under the occupation of various kinds of empire. Western empires, colonial empires that create and construct the terms of good and evil, human and non-human, and other hierarchies. Moreover, far left activism and politics have historical value amongst Black lesbian thinkers. For example, Angelina Well Grimke in her NAACP supported play in 1916, Rachel, was the first play to be supported about lynching and Black social death. Black lesbian journalist and playwright Lorraine Hansberry worked for Paul Robeson's Freedom magazine from 1951 to 1953. And one of the first reports she covered was the story of 100 pro-communist Black women. I'm happy that Clarissa brought up Pat Parker, because it's also important to note that Pat Parker, Black lesbian poet, not only challenged the existence of fascism and identified the fallacy of citizenship in her two separate poems, Don't Let the Fascists Speak and Where Do You Go to Become a Non-Citizen, she also chartered the first clinic that offered abortions to women in their second trimester. And lastly, but not least, Black lesbian poet Cheryl Clark was on a political prisoner defense committee advocating for the release of Assata Shakur between 1973 and 1976. I could go on, but it's important to know or evidence the long history of Black lesbian feminist writers, not only being in support of Palestine, but being anti-imperialist altogether. I also want to note, similarly to what Dr. Davis said, we have the capacity to concern ourselves with more than one thing at a time. We can hold that Palestine must be free, that Puerto Rico must be free, that Hawaii must be free, that the Sudanese must be free, that Black trans women must be free, that Indigenous peoples must be free. And it becomes clear that eclipsing oppression and holding freedom would necessitate the fall of every empire, the ending of every occupation, from every river to every sea. Pass it to Breya.
I don't know how to follow that. That, like, I feel that in my heart. Hello everyone, my name is Breya. I am a gender studies scholar, abortion doula, repo justice practitioner, and I like to consider myself an aspiring June Jordan scholar. I just got to get in the program to become the June Jordan scholar, but that's a conversation for another day. And a few years ago, when I was in high school, it was June Jordan who not just introduced me to what was happening in Palestine, because I can be honest and say I did not know anything about that when I was 16, but she was such a wonderful introduction to being anti-war and to anti-imperialism and to having a certain type of posture and ethic of concern and care about places outside of the US. And I think that that was really, really, really important, right? And she always said it plain. And recently, the quote that she said, Palestine is a moral litmus test, that quote, but she also followed that and said, my heart is not peripheral to me, right? And she talked about that. And so much of her politics were also concerned with her heart space. And so I think about what it means today for the people on this call, where you may not have the best analysis on empire, or you may not know all the ins and outs about geopolitical things, but I know that you came to this call because you feel something in your heart and you know that what is happening is wrong. And I think that so much of becoming a radical feminist starts from that place of saying, this is wrong, right? June Jordan always says somebody has got to do something about the way this world is set up. This is wrong. And so I want to read two passages from her. One of them is when she said, activism is not issue specific. It's a moral posture, steady state, propels you forward from one hand hour to the next, believing that you can do something to make things better. You do something rather than nothing. You assume responsibility for the privileges of your abilities. You do whatever you can. You reach beyond yourself in your imagination. And in your wish for understanding and for change, you admit to the limitations of individual perspectives. You trust someone else. You do not turn away. And in this moment, I'm really holding on to that last sentence of you do not turn away. And I think that this conversation is really beautiful, but the part of it that I can't let us ignore is like the amount of Black feminists who have turned away in this moment. They turned away from being anti-empire, from being anti-war. Somewhere down the line, we said that outside of the US was not as important. And we said that we will propel and like give way to Democrats or to funders and to all these other things. And we said that's more important than our solidarity with the rest of the world, whether it be the Middle East or it be Haiti or it be anywhere else. And I really feel like, when did we lose our strong stance against empire? When did we say that that was the place in our Black feminist politics that we could concede grounds on? And for me, what I want is, I want the next wave of faces of empire to not be Black women. And that is really concerning me these days. And so when I think about what it means to have solidarity with Palestine as a Black American woman, I think about like our mandate as Black feminists is to always tell the truth. And that we came on this call, I think Clarissa, you helped organize this call as a moment of like memory work. We need to like remember what our work really was intended to do, what we were supposed to be, right? We need to do the memory work. We're supposed to be bearing witness. We're not supposed to be turning away, like June Jordan said. We have a moral obligation to bear witness to what is happening in Palestine right now. We don't get to just turn it off and go worry about our struggles here. Bearing witness is a Black feminist praxis. And also the power of language, right? It's up to us as Black feminists to constantly counter the propaganda. And that's what we do every time we tell the truth. That's what we do every time we bring the voices of Palestinians over here to the Americas and we learn from them, right? I also think it's really important for me to say that my Black feminist politic is that I refuse to denounce any resistance effort of the Palestinian people. That if I'm going to say that I am uplifting June Jordan's also the one who said, y'all know the police poem. I woke up to the State Department looking at my LinkedIn, so I'm not going to read you that police poem, but go read what she said, right? If we uplifting June Jordan, we know what she was really saying, right? And so I think there's a level of honoring this, that I will never let the US government or the Israeli government or any empire tell me who my enemies are. And for me, solidarity means I refuse their language, I refuse their praxis, I refuse their propaganda, and I refuse their perspective. And it is Black feminists like June Jordan who helped me get comfortable and develop the courage to be able to do that. And that's why I love her so much. And so when I think about what solidarity means to me, it means that I am not always going to have the best analysis, but I will hop on this call through all of the comments in my inbox, through all of the threats, and I will still say I stand with Palestine unequivocally, without a doubt. I will not denounce any method that they find necessary to resist their occupation. And I also want to name that the Palestinian people, including the Afro-Palestinian people, are a part of resistance efforts right now that have made a mockery of the United States government. And I love that. And that is what I think it means to be in solidarity with them, to uplift that the US, with all its drones, with all its bullets, with all its chemical warfare, was still made a fool out of. And I think that the resistance practice and the level of faith that it takes to get up every morning and say that you will be free, and for us to say Palestine will be free from the river to the sea, that type of dedication is stronger than anything that the West could ever produce. The type of faith that you have to believe you will be free produces a type of resistance that cannot be tamed. And so when I think about what they did to spark this moment, those people thought that they could have a festival in front of an open air prison, in front of a concentration camp. And the people of Palestine say, absolutely not. No, you cannot. No, you cannot have a spectacle in front of us. And like, we are bearing witness to an act of resistance that is calling us to examine our levels of resistance in the United States. It's causing us to examine the tactics that we are using. And so I think solidarity with Palestine is one, bearing witness to them and uplifting them, but it's also saying, like, what can we learn? Can we humble ourselves as those living in the empire, and can we learn from them? I learn every day as a repo justice practitioner about what it means to actually engage in reproductive resistance. As I watch the Palestinian women find ways to counter not having access to sanitary products, when I watch the Palestinian women give birth and say, you will not exterminate us, I will have more children, I will parent my children, right? As I watch that, it gives me a better and deeper analysis of what it actually means to engage in reproductive justice. And right now, at a time when so many reproductive justice organizations have decided to turn their backs on the Palestinian people, and to act like this is not the biggest reproductive violation of our time, I think for me, solidarity really, really, really means getting as clear as June Jordan was and saying that in this moment, if you choose to turn away from this, I am turning away from you, because you cannot be a part of my version of Black feminist praxis or solidarity. I think this is one of the most defining moments we've had in the Black feminist world in a long time. And when I uplift June Jordan, I also uplift, the stories where people say they told her to calm down, where they told her too much. And so I aim to be as too much as June Jordan was. And I aim for my heart to not be peripheral to me. And so my heart is with the Palestinian people, but it's also with their resistance that I want to uplift. And I hope I'm not over time, Jaimee.
No, you were right on time. Okay, y'all are all right on time. So, oh wow, just thank you, Clarissa, Briona, and Breya for your offerings. And before we go to the Q&A with all of us, right, I want to read something, a poem, a part of a poem by Ntozake Shange. It's titled Bokus, A Daughter's Geography, published in 1983. It reads, "There is no edge, no end to the new world, because I have a daughter, Trinidad. I have a son, San Juan. Our twins, Cape Town and Palestine, cannot speak the same language, but we fight the same old men who thought the earth was flat. Go on over the edge, go on over the edge, old men. You'll see us in Luanda, or the rest of us in Chicago, rounding out the morning. We are feeding our children the sun." And I think about, once again, I think all of y'all touched on it, these interconnected struggles, right, that we have a mandate to. And I want to thank Dr. Beverly Guy-Sheftall for your kind words about the reading list. And the reading list that Dr. Guy-Sheftall is referencing is a Solidarity with Palestine, a Black feminist mandate that I created for Black male radicals. And in it, we have several sources, right, from Shirley Graham Du Bois to Winnie Mandela and so on, who have always been in solidarity with Palestine. And as I wrap up before we get to the Q&A, and this is echoing my esteemed panel, we cannot cite Angela Davis and Beverly Guy-Sheftall and Shirley Graham Du Bois and Winnie Mandela and all these people, Pat Parker, June Jordan, et cetera, the Combahee River Collective, and get tenure and get books and be silent, right? And overlook their praxis, right? Because this is also, I think, imperial as well, right? I think this is also elitism as well. So what are we doing when we say I have a radical Black feminist mandate? Is it just to post stories on social media, or are we really about this life? And right now, we have to be about this life for the lives of Palestinian people. So if you would like to reference the reading list, it's free. It's available on blackmanradicals.com. And please use it, and please read, and please delve into the radical Black feminist praxis of our ancestors, of folks who are present here today, because we are also concerned with the future of not only Black feminist thought and behavior, but the future of Palestinian people. And so we're going to hop into a Q&A discussion. And I also want to start off with Dr. Angela Davis and Dr. Beverly Guy-Sheftall in a question. So what we are seeing, and what also has occurred in the past, we're seeing McCarthy-esque reactions to those who are unabashed in their solidarity with Palestine, and both of y'all spoke this, and the critique of the Israeli state. And so however, we also know that speaking out can have material consequences, like we said before: rescinded job offers, removal from political and organizational positions, repression of pro-Palestinian protests, etc. And so what advice would you offer to Black feminists who may have concerns about facing backlash or reprisal for being in solidarity with Palestine? Oh, Dr. Gashefta, I think you're muted. I think Dr. B, she's still muted.
Beverly, you're still muted.
Oh, I would say, and Angela knows this deeply and personally, you will experience backlash. When Angela and the group came back from Palestine, we actually got death threats. And there were people at Emory University, Jewish student organization, that called and asked that I be fired from Spelman because I had gone on the delegation. So that's going to come. That is backlash and threats, and sometimes even worse than that. So that's a given. I think, though, you cannot let that keep you from doing the work that you want to do. And Andrew might want to say a little bit more about how you manage threats and all of that. But it's going to happen. And let me just mention, for example, the situation that's going on right now at Harvard University that has its first Black woman president, Professor Gay, is experiencing huge backlash, calls for her to be fired. Jewish alumni from Harvard and other professors, and what I would argue is that's probably an excuse. That is, the Palestinian situation is probably an excuse. So this is very serious business, and you will get called out.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct, Beverly. And I think that the best preparation for responding to those threats, to those McCarthyite efforts to push people out of jobs, to guarantee that they are canceled. The best response is to have a community, to see this, not as something that is going to attack us as an individual, because usually the assaults are focused on individuals, but to recognize that before they even begin to come in, we have to be prepared. We have to have a collective kind of resistance. And I know I can tell you that a few years ago, I think it was 2016, I was offered a Human Rights Award in Birmingham, which is where I'm from the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute. It was exciting. I was going to go home and receive this Human Rights Award named after someone Fred Shuttlesworth, whom I knew and with whose daughters I went to school. And then I got this telephone call, that they were going to have to rescind the award. And I said, what? And for what? And they said, for statements that you have made. Well, I mean, it's interesting that these were members of the board of the Civil Rights Institute, and they never told me the reasons why they were rescinding. But it became clear very quickly that it was because of pressure from Zionist elements in the Birmingham community. And they capitulated to those pressures. Now, what they did not realize was that people all over the world would respond. I mean, I understand that I have a particular positionality, given the fact that 50 years ago, there was a huge international movement around the campaign for my freedom. But at the same time, I think this was largely because of the organizing that had happened during that period to figure out how to push back the impact of Zionism in this country, and how to make a space to have conversations about justice for Palestine. And so within a short period of time, all kinds of statements came in from, and not only from Black people in Birmingham community, but from Jewish people in the community. I got messages of solidarity from rabbis in other countries. And I say this because, even though we recognize the real danger of putting ourselves out there and taking a stance, we can also see the images of demonstrations all over the country for Palestine. Demonstrations in South Africa. And of course, Nelson Mandela said that South Africa will never be truly free until Palestine is free. So I guess I want to suggest two things. One, that we do not underestimate the global support for Palestine. And two, that we do not treat it as if it were an individual attack, and that we have to simply, deal with the particular kinds of questions that are posed by the issue if we only treat it as an individual. It's collective. And so we gather our collective resistance even before the attacks come, because we know there will be counter assaults. We know there will be backlashes. And I could say that the same thing holds true for where we are now in general in this country. Even though the majority of people, I truly believe, want to participate in the dismantling of structural racism, there are those who continue to make it appear as if they hold all of the power, and therefore they can get critical race theory, out of high schools where they never were in the first place. But you understand what I'm saying. I think that we need to be aware of our own collective power, even though that collective power may sometimes only be potential, but figure out how to harness it and how to fight back together.
Can I say, which Angela didn't say, she was re-invited to get the award in Birmingham because of that collective power. And she gracefully said yes. And so she traveled to Birmingham and got the award.
And not only that, but they reorganized the board.
Yes.
And they also incorporated Palestine into the work that they're doing. So as it turns out, it doesn't always happen this way. But in that particular case, the response was so overwhelming that they felt compelled to completely transform their position.
Thank y'all both so much for those offerings. And I'm glad that they gave you the award, Dr. Davis. They better anyway. But I wanted to also, you touched on this, Dr. Davis, and I also wanted to hear from you, Dr. Guy Sheftall. So in your opinions, Dr. Davis, you talked about critical race theory. In your opinions, how is the repression and censorship of those who are against the collective punishment, surveillance, and genocide of Palestinians connected to this censorship and restrictions of theories, books on race, gender, and more in the classroom in the US?
You want to go, Beverly?
You can go. I can just quickly say, same impulses, same folk. Many radical Black feminists were already involved in the book banning, the removal of critical race theory classes, queer theory classes, the College Board's disgusting revision of the African American Studies course. Just imagine, we were already doing that just a few weeks ago. Particularly the African American Policy Forum was providing a lot of leadership. And so here this came, and it's the same, these are the same forces, the same sentiments, anti-racist people, racist people, sexist people, homophobic people, imperialist people, who lump all of this in the same category.
And yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Beverly. And this is a conjuncture. This is a particular historical conjuncture where we're fighting for the very potential to bring about change and to move forward. And there's a minority of people, and I don't like to call their names out. I always say that I totally embrace the African tradition of naming, that naming also accords power. So there are those whose names I don't pronounce, and they're in the minority, but you wouldn't know it. And oftentimes you wouldn't know it from the way we respond. We respond as if they were in the majority. Of course, sometimes they have the power and their voices are louder, but I truly believe that it's a kind of counter-revolutionary effort. They've witnessed how quickly new ideas can take hold, particularly around issues of gender and sexuality. How young people embody those new notions. There's some of us who can remember not very long ago when if somebody asked you for your pronouns, you would say, what? What does that have to do with anything? But young people now understand the importance of questioning binaries, and not only with respect to gender identity, and this is one of the great things about the trans movement and the movement that trans people have given leadership to, that it helps us to understand that anything can be questioned, that what we consider normal is generally ideology. And I like what Juanima Lubiana once said, the more normal something appears to be, the more ideological it is. This is a struggle that will continue, but we have to believe in the possibility of holding our ground and recognizing that you don't just win victories and then lay down. Whenever you move forward, you have to protect your positions. You have to be really vigilant. You have to expect that there are going to be these kinds of backlashes. It shouldn't come as a surprise. I think we're in a position now where what we do in the next period is going to have implications for the future of this country and the world.
Thank you both for your offerings. We really do appreciate them. And I want to bring in Clarissa, Briona, and Breya, because we've all touched on it, but y'all have touched on it. But there has been such a disconnect on citational and political practice, specifically when it comes to Black feminist literary and political traditions in Palestine. Especially when we see at this particular moment, silence by many Black feminists Black feminist organizations, reproductive justice organizations, et cetera, regarding this. And I'm wondering, like, why do y'all think that there is this like citational political disconnect when we cite Toni Morrison, we cite Angela Davis, we cite Beverly Guy Sheftall, but then when it comes to the practice of being in solidarity, many of us are not doing it or don't want to do it. Why do you think that there is this disconnect? Oh, you were unmuted.
I said this question is for all of us or just whoever wants to answer.
Y'all feel free to do what it do, do what it does, feel free to hop in, right?
Well, for one, I think that a part of the problem is that like everyone is not reading from Middle Eastern Black women. That's one. And I think that people are able to pick up certain Black feminist scholars and it's kind of like, I like this chapter, right? Like, I like this June Jordan poem. I'm gonna keep this one and I'm not gonna read all the things she said about Nicaragua or Palestine or war in general. I think that there is a very explicit cherry picking that happens when all you drink from is US-based Black feminists, right? When you turn off the reading from the rest of the world, I think you're already limited. And then within that, it's a level of cherry picking that I think happens when the right funders infiltrate your movement. Like, I just can't act as if that's not something that's hovering over the silence that is happening right now, right? When certain people are being asked to speak, the first thing they're saying is the funders, the funders, the funders, the funders, right? And so the funders love the version of Audre Lorde that is, your silence will not protect you. They love that, right? The funders love that. And that's cool to put on a quote. That's cool to have in wherever your office is located. You're in Northwest DC, and that's cool to put a quote on the wall. But I think really reckoning with power in a way that threatens the state is something that a lot of people don't want to do. And of course, yes, there are actual real risk assessments to this, right? Like, I'm not going to pretend as if this is not something that could actually bring danger to your life. But I think that when we get into the cherry pickings of Black feminisms, that can't be divorced from a real conversation about when our movement became a very careerist one, when our movement became beholden to funders, right? And I also think that there are a difference between, this might get a little spicy. There is a difference between Black women who are doing particular forms of gender justice work versus Black women who identify as Black feminists. And I think we really need to start paying attention to some of those differences, right? There's a difference between I work at this organization that is concerned with what's happening to Black women in Baltimore versus I identify with the legacy and the mandates of radical Black feminism. A lot of these people are not concerned with that latter the way that those of us on this call are. Like, the type of concern and the type of expanding your heart to say that what happens to the people in Palestine is also happening to me, like that connection is not happening. And I think that's why it's so easy to concede. And when you don't read from them, when you don't learn from them, when you don't reference them, when you act like they don't exist and you essentially silo yourself, what we're talking about are people who are inundated with a very particular empire-serving Black feminist US-based praxis. And we gotta start separating ourselves from those kinds of people, because then we have this tension where we thought we were all coming to the table to stand with Palestine, and we're at this table like, oh, this is not important to you? Oh, okay. So I think that like that's really a part that I can't let go of. But I'm gonna pass it to you, Clarissa, because I want to know what you have to say in the media space about this.
Yeah, I appreciate that point of analysis. I think that question of like, what's the disconnect is really connected to just the corporate capture of Black feminism. I'm even thinking about, of course, we have the books, we just have to read the books. Audre Lorde has an essay called Apartheid USA that she wrote in 1985 specifically about South Africa that, is not quoted by folks and not engaged with. And I think Briona could give more context to this, but there is a way that I think the internet and social media really takes context out of a lot of these Black feminist legacies where folks are engaging with just a quote or one essay, but they're not looking at where these essays are in their lineage, where they are in their journeys and their works, thinking about how Lorde's work shifts as she gets older, as she gets cancer, how her writing and language changes through her own personal transformation. Folks are engaging with the quote on Instagram and keeping it pushing because it makes them feel good. And that's, one way to start, but I think something that I'm really interested in as a journalist and as somebody who feels really critical of the internet is how can we actually be more intentional with our time and be more intentional with our ask of understanding of media. So not just taking a quote as it is, but actually finding it, doing the research, reading the text fully, seeing how it connects to your own thinking in your own place and looking at that writer's legacy. I think that feels really important to me. And I think in the media space, the disconnect is that there is a class of elite that do hold media. And for that, and I think the reason why me and Breya got into some Instagram DMs and decided to coordinate this call was around the fact that we couldn't find spaces or places where Black folks were talking about Black feminist legacies in Palestine. And truly, I do not say this lightly, was begging editors all week to be like, can I write something? And they were like, no. And that is just a reality of the media space currently. And something that has really kept me in this week is looking at June Jordan's work and understanding that she dealt with countless betrayals. And I'm thinking specifically of just her time first speaking out about Palestine and how she was denied awards, taken off a book list. And I see her struggle with that and how lonely that must have felt and how isolating that must have felt. And to be on this call with y'all and to see that I'm actually not in this by myself and that there's a legacy of Black feminists who, like me, take this sacrifice seriously, I think feels really important. And I think the last thing I want to say is that folks who identify as Black feminists, I think also have an acceptance that the path of our lives is not always going to be pretty or clean. And oftentimes folks who don't identify as Black feminists, but care about, Black folks in a particular way, they want a certain trajectory. And we know reading the work of these Black feminist scholars that it's just not guaranteed. When you question empire, when you question the state, that path is just not guaranteed. And we've accepted that and we do the work despite that. The quote that actually was coming to me in this moment was Lorde's quote of, the machine is going to grind you down regardless of if you speak or not. And that has really, really kept me in this week in the sense of, I've got this one chance and I have to speak out for things that, Breya, as you said, really hit that heart space. And I'll pass it to Briona.
I'll be quick because I essentially just got to the academy yesterday. So I'm still learning about the nuances, but what I know for sure is that the academy is another site or another corporate entity, right? We are bought and we are supposed to play particular kinds of roles. And so I think that I'm not disillusioned by the lack of support because I'm really clear that even in 2023, I identify as a Black lesbian because of their political acuity. I mean, we could talk about gender and sexuality and how we've evolved over time, but I'm not disillusioned because I think what I learned kind of early on that there's a class thing happening and a canonical thing happening where if we were to assess the Black studies departments and if we were to assess the women's studies departments across the US, it would make sense why people aren't speaking out about Palestine. So, I can't really speak to why people aren't speaking out, but I was raised by sharecroppers who were born in Jackson, Mississippi. And so my perspective about like centering my intellectual life around working class people and issues and publications, like that's natural to me. And so I think that, if we look at the people we have cited, the Academy hated them. The Academy killed Audre Lorde and wouldn't give her leave. The Academy killed June Jordan. The Academy is attempting to kill junior faculty. So, and there's some people who have passed away. So I think I am very like specific about like lineage and even etymology, because think about someone like Angelina Well Grimke, right? She's writing about lynching in 1916. And both her and Lorraine were middle class, but they were also very concerned with working class Black people. So I can't really speak to careerists and Black feminisms. I don't really engage those people. I think I engage my family. I think I engage students. And many of you have supported, my book, Mouths of Rain. The majority of those writers are unpublished. Many of those writers have never stepped foot into an academic institution. And I think in developing my political identity, like from the Combahee River Collective Statement, I really am thinking about like who is at the bottom, who are the people who are at the bottom. And so while this may not be canon, I think that like there is sort of, if I'm thinking about who's at the bottom of even Palestine, gay people are not free in Palestine. Gay people are not free in Israel either. And so I think that also here, Black trans women are still dying. The other day, a Black trans woman was struck by a car, right? Ruled a homicide, 30 years old. And so I think that once we get rid of Hamas, once we get rid of sort of these agents of the state that the state actually produces, I think there is going to be something to be said about sort of the theocratic government or theology in general, in the way in which it sort of continues to render people like subhuman or non-human at all. And so my political identity, who I cite, who I don't pay attention to, all has to do with sort of being born from a working class poor community. So.
Definitely. I'm sorry, does anyone want to say something before I hop in? We're nearing time and I just want to make sure we get to our last question for all of us.
I wanted to say something super quickly, because I think, these kind of spaces feel important to name the importance of organizing, right? So the importance of being in a political home, having a political space, even if it's not a movement home or a movement space. I just have been in deep conversation about the importance of the BDS movement and how it raised me, how it raised a lot of people. And BDS is the boycott, divest and sanction movement against Israel, and the importance of cultural work. So I think before leaving this space, I think it's important to name that like people need to think about what does a political home look like for you? How can you make organizing a part of your everyday life? And like what culture and political shifts do you still need to spend more time with? I name those questions because oftentimes on these calls, people are looking for like, tell me a next step. And I think it really is like, there is no grandiose next step to stop our taxpaying dollars from killing Palestinians, but we can have the hard conversations, build, join political spaces and organize so that when these moments of crisis happen, we're not rattled, we're not shaken. We can actually say, I have a political home in a space where I can push, where I can name where my money's going. I can name, where my taxpaying dollars are going, and I can push back against it and really build a muscle for resistance in our everyday lives. Like, it's not easy, it's not righteous, it's not always fun, but yeah, organizing is worth it.
Yeah, Clarissa, I'm so glad you said that too, just quickly before I offer the last question, is that I think that there's such a disconnect when it comes to the literary and political canon and tradition of Black feminists in Palestine is because often I think about Bell Hooks and Feminism is for Everybody. She talks about the institutionalization of women's studies, right? And prior to women's studies, it was feminist consciousness raising groups of working class and poor Black and brown women discussing feminism from their perspective. But then with the institutionalization of women's studies, you have the co-optation and pacification, right, of whether it's Black women's studies, what Black feminism truly means, what Barbara Smith was like, what does solidarity mean? What does organizing mean? What does it mean to be radical? And so I think a lot of times in academia, we hoard information as well. And so I think another important aspect is, what about political education? What about popular education? What about working or going to groups that don't necessarily have to be tethered to the institution or academic institution or ivory tower, but working with folks in community, book clubs, things of that nature, to really have these important conversations about the radical Black feminist tradition with Palestine. Because as we know, if you speak up in many academic spaces, it's often kicked out of things of that nature. So how do we go beyond academia and reporting and to really center our folks, right, who are doing the work, like you said, with organizing? But my last question for everybody, and I want to offer this first to Dr. Davis and Dr. Guy Sheftall, and then to Clarissa, Breya, and Briona. What are your hopes for the future of Black and Palestinian feminist solidarities? And where would you like to see that go?
Quickly, I'm really focused right now on young Black students at HBCUs because I think there has been an absence and a silence there. So I have been really hopeful about what I've seen on our campus in the AU Center in terms of what the students and you know, they didn't come there knowing very much about Palestine. So I think it is really possible. I'm hopeful that we can continue to get young Black students to be committed to Palestine. So I'm hopeful.
Thank you, Dr. BGS.
Okay, I'll say a couple of words, and I'll preface my response to your question by saying that during the period prior to our visit to Palestine, so it must have been in 2000, maybe 5 or 6 or 7 or 8, a number of us were talking about and concerned about the fact that Palestine was not really a part of social justice agendas. So it was a separate question. And so people who were doing work on reproductive justice, people who were doing work on prison industrial complex, et cetera, didn't necessarily focus any activity on Palestine. So a number of us in certain parts of the country got together and asked, what can we do to address this issue? You know, why is Palestine always marginalized? You know, why is it that you have these people who are progressive except for Palestine? And they could be considered progressive because Palestine wasn't a part of our social justice issue, our social justice agenda. And, you know, I think that we were relatively successful, and I say we, and I'm talking about large numbers of people who kind of embrace this imperative. It took time, and you know, I can remember that shortly after we went to Palestine, Beverly, in 2011, then you had Black Lives Matter delegation to Palestine. Dream Defenders began to do delegations to Palestine, and over a period of a few years, it did begin to, the issue made its way onto social justice agendas. And so I say this to indicate that if we set out to address a serious problem, it's possible sometimes to experience victory in a certain sense. And I think that we have to follow up on that Palestine should actually be central to social justice issues. We should say, like Nelson Mandela did, that South Africa cannot be free until Palestine is free, that there can be no freedom in the world if Palestine still remains under occupation by the Zionist Israeli government. So I want to say that I'm optimistic, but that optimism is framed by the requirement that we do the work in order to make it through this really difficult moment in our history.
Thank you both so much. Clarissa, Briona, Breya, would love your thoughts before we close out.
What's the original question again?
What are
Sorry.
your hopes for the future of Black and Palestinian feminist solidarities?
Yeah, I think my hope is that we embrace this solidarity with more intention than we ever have before. My hope is that we take seriously the questions and concerns and the interventions that Black women in the Middle East, Afro-Palestinian women, and so on have given us. Like, my question is that if we say that we're in solidarity with this part of the world, like, are we doing the work to fight against Islamophobia as hard as we should be? Right? Like, these are the questions for me. Are we embedding this into the work that we do every day? Is it as important as the questions that we've asked as US-based Black feminists, right? So upping the scales, I think, is really, really important, because unlike some of the Black women that we've cited on this call today, I still think that many Black feminists or gender justice concerned Black women have conceded grounds on this topic over and over and over again. And so for me, it's like, will we stop allowing that in our spaces? Will we answer these questions, right? I think is really, really, really important. And I think that when we come to these calls and these spaces, are we willing to use these platforms to actually uplift their demands, right? Because we already are assuming risk. We're anti-Semitic just by organizing this call, right? That's what they're saying in my DMs, at least, right? So are we going to actually use these spaces to do what we need to do? And from what I have been reading, the Palestinian people are saying, okay, yes, an immediate ceasefire and also land back. And also it is the US funded missiles and bullets and drones that are falling on us. So go to those headquarters. That's something that you can do in your country, on your land. Go do that, right? Don't denounce our resistance. Don't denounce Hamas, because that's US propaganda, right? They're asking us for very specific things. And I think that solidarity means that those things are important. They're more important than how I feel. They're more important than me not understanding the full political terrain of it, but those are the demands, right? And I think that that's what I want the solidarity to look like. We're already assuming the risk, so let's assume it, right? Let's assume it. And so when I say that Palestine will be free, I will not make you comfortable and talk about a two-state solution. I will not make you comfortable and denounce Hamas so you can feel better. I will unapologetically say Palestine has to be free by any means necessary, that this is a reproductive justice violation, right? That right now, what is happening is egregious, and that we have to figure out from where we are located, what can we do? And what I love about Black feminisms is, like, that's the question. From where you reside in this time, what can you do? And from that question, so many beautiful things are born. And I just hope that we take that and we take it as far as it actually needs to go. And that we uplift every single version of the demands that they have asked us to do. So when I showed up on this call today, I showed up to just be like, I'm going to say the parts that they will really, 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 really wipe me out for saying. But like, we have to bring back Black feminist courage, because why not? And so I know, just alone by what I've said on this call, it's a couple of people that are going to call me Monday like, girl, that consulting contract, we can't work with you no more. And that is okay. That is okay if it means that immediate ceasefire might happen because I countered some propaganda on this call. And that for me is my hope for solidarity. I'm willing to lose a lot if it means that Palestinian people and the Middle Eastern people can be free.
Thank you, Breya. Briona, Clarissa?
I'm hopeful, I think similarly to Beverly, about the political consciousness of the people who are younger than me. I think that social media, despite antagonisms with how they've shifted, or antagonisms that caused them to shift, I do think that I have seen a younger generation of people who are more politically organized, even in a social space. I'm also hopeful that this idea of an integrated analysis will pervade all of our thinking. I really do feel like it's as Dr. Davis said, like we can walk and chew gum. A lot of people I know have several jobs, our partners, our parents, et cetera. And so I think it's also important to believe and hope that you could hold more than one thing at a time, and that you can shift, the circumstances of not only your position, but the positions of other people. So yeah, I'm not leaning into despair, but I do think that there's some petite empires that we are grappling with that also have to end after occupation in Palestine. So I'm hopeful for like multiple falls, multiple failures, multiple uprisings too.
Thank you, Briona. Clarissa?
Yeah, I think that was so helpful to feel and think through. I think, there's nothing better than Black people on the entire world. So that is always my starting point, always the thing that brings me back to center. And I think I called my mom about this maybe last week, and I just asked her like what she was doing in the world when the occupation happened, not 1948, but just like if she had some sort of memory of Palestine and Israel. And she reminded me of like doing like bomb tests and practicing in her high school because folks really thought that the US, Charlotte, North Carolina specifically, was going to be bombed. And I think that has been really critical for me, is to engage elders, engage my family, engage close friends, and really ask like, not even where they stand, but just like, what's your memory on this? Like where were you when this was happening? And then when they say, I don't know about it, or I don't got time to worry about it, I can engage them in conversation about it. Because Black folks care about Black folks, right? Like, I think that's the thing I'm really thinking about, is like, I want to build even stronger communities. So if someone I know and love and care about is dealing with Zionist attacks, they know that they got me. They know that they got other people that can make sure that they're good, that can, get them a new job, get them a new contract where they don't got to worry about that. I just want us to have really solid networks and ecosystems of people, because those are the things that have kept me here. When I've dealt with attacks from folks, organizing in Black feminism saved my life, and I want to be that for other people. And I think lastly, young people are always, they're just great. They're just luscious beings. Particularly, I sent a TikTok to my friend Delaney of this Black TikToker talking about all money isn't good money. And particularly, he was like, if a company or a brand isn't going to pay you because you're talking about Palestine, then they're not worth your time. You got here, you built this platform because of who you are. And to see young Black people have that integrated analysis is so exciting to me, because that's why cultural work is important to me. Being able to say A to B, this is why this is connected, and seeing young Black people do that work it feels like all of it's worth it. So I'm keeping my hope and joy there.
Mhm.
Well, I just want to say thank you to everyone, Dr. Davis, Dr. Beverly Guy-Sheftall, Clarissa Brooks, Breya Johnson, Briona Simone Jones, our wonderful ASL interpreters, Kat and Gloshonda. Thank y'all so much for your time, your offerings, your perspectives, and I hope that the future of Black and Palestinian feminist solidarities will yield a response, an immediate response that's unwavering, and that we won't have to question, right, whether we're in solidarity or not. It's just that we are in solidarity. Mm-hmm. And so I thank y'all for a wonderful time, or a wonderful discussion, and free Palestine. Have a great night. Thank y'all.
I mean, can I say all of the people, over 500 people in the audience, please go and look at Roadmap to Apartheid, the film, the documentary film, and show it everywhere you can. And I guarantee you, we'll have thousands of people talking about free Palestine.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Dr. BGS. Have a great one, y'all. Thank you, Dr. Davis. Thank y'all so much.
Thank y'all.
Bye-bye.
Wait, Jaimee, do we stay on or do we get off?
No, we get off. Thank you, Gloshonda and Kat. Thank you, Clarissa. Thank you.